So I left it. I left Marvel. I reached out to CB, who is now the editor-in-chief, on my way out, and I was just like, hey man, is there anything else you guys, have planned that I could go to? And CB was like, well, it's my understanding you quit your book. And I wrote back, I said, well, no, I left my book after completing my contract, what I agreed to do, 5 issues. And there was no reply back. But like I said, I feel like CB always hated me, and for whatever God knows reason. And so there you go. And so I was like, fine, that's fine. And I was done. I closed the door on Marvel, and I just said, well, what am I going to do now? Well, I'm going to finish Graveyard Shift, and we're going to see if we can get that published through Image. And that's going to be that. If nothing else, I'm going to finish this book, and which would have been Volume 1 and Volume 2, and then I'm going to walk away. I'm going to go back. I'm going to do construction. I'm going to find another job or something I can do into retirement. Like you
wanted to get out of comics.
I'm ready, because this is such a, disenchanting,
comics broke your heart
of the comic industry. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, it is not at all what I thought it would be. It's politicized. The egos, undeserved egos of somebody like even CB Sobalski. Like, what did you ever do? You did nothing. You absolutely nothing to become the editor-in-chief. You have no creative vision. They gave him a manga-verse because that was supposed to be his wheelhouse, was doing manga. And all he ever understood about manga that I could tell is that you get big eyes, pointy chin. Like, I'm like, this is your thing. And it crashed and burned,
It seems like that whole thing where they get promoted because it's the least effective person. And the most ineffective individual usually gets that promotion to the highest spot because they're kind of a yes man and they don't really impart any of their own vision and ideas. Mm-hmm. So corporate can kind of run wild and do what they got to do. Yeah. And that's kind of what it really seemed like.
We need at least one nerd back in there that, that bookworm that knows every stupid detail working to maintain these continuities. And then you can still do these kind of reboots and whatnot, as almost like kind of Elseworld events. And it work out just fine. You still get that reboot stuff, but you have your long-term money, which is that continuity. And eventually you would have your really great stories in there again. Those are all your opportunities to tie into the cinematic universe. No problem. Hey, we got a movie coming out. Let's find out what that plot is, or if we have to wait for the movie to come out, we follow that. So when people are leaving the theaters, they can go to a comic shop and they will find that character sitting there waiting for them. And they didn't. They had no game plan. And again, when you have non-creative types, that's what you get. You get people coming in with no game plan. Right down to Disney when they bought Star Wars. They paid $4 or $6 billion for this property, and Walt Disney, the founder, would have rolled in his grave if Bob Iger had actually presented his business plan to him on what they're going to do with this property. Because you know what that business plan was? Nothing. There was no plan. It's a $4 billion investment with no plan because George Lucas offered a treatment, and they're like, oh, thanks, George. And they put it aside and they did nothing. They're like, we already have something in the plans. And we found out after the movies came out, they had no plan. J.J. Abrams kind of had an idea. Rian Johnson didn't want to do anything that J.J. had set up. And then J.J. had to come back in and shoehorn everything together in the last movie. And it was trash. And that's a $4 billion investment. Walt Disney would have killed these guys for making a $4 billion deal with his money and having no game plan. But that's just it. They aren't creative. They aren't intelligent people running these companies.
Disney's always relatively been a company, too, that adapted properties that existed and then put their Disney spin on it. That's kind of been their bread and butter.
All the animation, all old fairy tales. But you had a creative genius like Walt Disney guiding this stuff, and he was a taskmaster too, he was a serious dude, expected the best all the time. He was short on compliments.
Yeah, he knew what to do with the art direction though.
Yeah, and he had a vision. It wasn't just moving images. It was sound. It was the full cinematic experience put into a cartoon. And I mean, a real businessman, a real creative genius, and everything that an aspiring creator should want to be. You should want to be Walt Disney. But they don't have that. On the creative end, they're bankrupt. Nobody has any balls. Everyone's afraid they're gonna insult somebody else. That's the way of life, and that's the way of creativity, and that's the way of comedy. Comedy is often, almost always, insulting to somebody. What's the point if we can't fucking laugh a little bit at the stupidity or the or the habits that we all tend to admit amongst ourselves that we have? So let's laugh because someone's saying something that we're thinking, and now it's funny because they said it out loud. You got to have that, man. And people can't do it. They're super afraid of offending anybody. It's lack of creativity. They're so afraid, but being afraid, that's what non-creative people are. They're afraid. All they know is self-preservation. I got to be able to keep my job and not to make any waves. Creative people make waves. They're going to make waves. And, but also you do have a responsibility. I'm like, look, man, you want to have your point of view. I've always drawn a line. I've said this on streams. I draw a line. I draw a line between mainstream superhero comic books, which I grew up in love, and the independent market, including Image, IDW, all these other companies. If you have your political view and you have to get this out and it's abrasive and whatnot or alienates people, you may want to go ahead and do that in the independent market. More power to you. Have fun. Take your book, let Image publish it. You'll get backpats and you'll be broke. It's fine. And I know people like to post the Stan Lee soapbox where it's talking about social issues and stuff like that. What Stan said on video, and I played it in one of my Mail In After Midnight videos. I put a little clip in there. And he said, look, I understand there's social issues and things to be talked about. But he said he never did it in a way that would take people out of the story or, beat them over the head. You put it in there softly so that people can hear it, understand it, and consider it. And you keep going on with your story. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that's what he said.
Yeah, it was more like, no, this is what this character feels. This is what this character is going through, etc. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't ever anything that was, just hammered over your head. It wasn't a heavy-handed approach to it at all. And more often than not, I found that both sides would often be presented. And devil's advocate was something I think Stan was really great at playing. And he could present an argument for the other side that maybe he did not, and probably most likely did not agree with at all, but could make a convincing character out of it.
So, anyways, I'm done with Marvel now, and I'm working on Graveyard Shift. And during this time, people are talking to a YouTuber named Richard C. Meyer. And they're apparently telling him, hey, there's this guy who's drawing Cable. As the issues are still coming out, you should be checking him out or something. And I had made it before he had reached out to me. I had made a tweet, and it was someone had asked me because I think I had shown up on a Yellow Flash stream. I think that was like one of the first streams I was ever on, and it was a real early stream for him as well. And we got into a discussion about SJWs and whatnot. And somebody had came back to me and said, aren't the X-Men SJWs in a tweet? And I'm like, no, not at all. I'm like, the X-Men are more like the Jews in SJW Hitler's Nazi Germany. And I said, I'm not saying that SJWs are Nazis, but I am saying that Nazis are SJWs. These are people that took a specific portion of the population, vilified them, and, over a course of, years, ended up trying to eradicate. You know what I mean? Like, these are real possibilities in a culture. It just takes a cultural shift to move somebody from hating somebody universally to saying, you know what? It's okay to kill them. Just kill them all.
It becomes authoritarian oppression.
Yeah. And, so that's a warning, and the X-Men don't want that. I don't think Jack Kirby or Stan Lee want that. If
the X-Men were fighting for segregation, which is what Magneto was fighting for, to segregate mutants from the human populace, the X-Men were fighting for integration.
Yes, they were looking for understanding and peace of different issues and tolerance. And SJWs, they claim they're tolerant, but they don't understand tolerant because there isn't any opposing view that they've ever been tolerant of.
Do you write?
Yeah, so I'm writing right now. You know, I've always been much more of like plot and kind of script doctoring. So, you know, I get involved on every aspect of my comic book creation. So, which actually let me just kind of take off. So I did that tweet. It blew up. It was like a bomb. I knew it'd have a bite, but I didn't know it was going to be like, there was some lady from Deep Space Nine trying to get me fired from Marvel because everybody thought I was still working at Marvel, but I wasn't. You know, I was very clean at Marvel. I didn't politicize my timeline. I didn't try to be offensive to anybody. You know, I just, hey, here's some art. I hope you guys check this book out. You know, I'm just doing my job. But this tweet went like wildfire. But I'm no longer working there. It doesn't matter. And you know, so people are trying to get me fired, and then maybe a month after that, I think Richard might have reached out to me. Hey, you know, you're controversial. People like you. I'm controversial. You know, maybe we can do something together, do a book together, and you know, maybe something can happen out of that. You know, and I'm like, I agree. You know, but it wasn't something that was lightly and that quick. You know, I do recall being like, let me think about it. And it wasn't like a stall. Well, let me think about it. I had to really think about it. So, because it was so political at that time in 2017, 18.
Yeah, I want to say 2017.
Yeah. Like it just got so bad that it was so political at that time in 2017, 18.
Yeah, I want to say 2017.
Yeah, like it just got so bad that whatever year we ended up launching Jawbreakers, that's what it was. You know, it had gotten so bad that to hitch my wagon to Richard C. Meyer, it was dynamite. It could have been incredibly explosive. And at that time, I knew I would never be able to work into the mainstream because he was so despised by the mainstream that I would never be able to work in the mainstream. Well, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, if everything shifts back to regular people having, you know, truly regular thoughts about the world, like if that was okay. So yeah, I had to think about it. And I did. And then I was like, all right, you know, let's do it. So we made an agreement on what we're going to do here. You know, this is me throwing away my career. And I already said, you know, like, look, I'm doing Graveyard Shift and I'm going to be able to just walk away. So, but paid work comes first. Richard makes an offer and I say, you know what, this could be big. And, but it could also be the most embarrassing moment of my life. There was no track record amongst the group called Comicsgate for publishing. Nothing else had gone out there and done anything. It was really a big question mark. How interested were the people that were paying attention to Richard, anybody that was following my work? How interested were they to come in and support this? And I remember, like, my thought was like, if we ended up doing a campaign together, and if this thing didn't even meet a goal of, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000, if we raised and squeaked by at like $2,000 raised or something very small number, like, this industry is primed. And it was primed to chew us up and spit us out and laugh us out for our effort. And that was going to be it. Like, Graveyard Shift, forget it. Nobody's going to publish Graveyard Shift. Like, you know, there's no hope. I'm like, you know, so I had to think about it. You know, these are real considerations. You know, I remember these being some of the longest, you know, moments in my life, you know, from when I told the editor, you know, what, again, that wasn't easy.
So you really weighed heavily on that decision.
Yeah. One of the longest nights of my life. Yeah. Cause at first I was like, I'm not going to fight it, but I'm like, no, I have to have conviction. I have to just stand up for myself, you know? And so I got back to the editor and I said, no, I'm going to walk. And same thing with the Richard thing. Like, that's a long night. That night when I went over on whether or not I was going to quit Marvel, you know, or cable specifically, that felt like one of those nights where I aged like 10 years. It was so difficult. I was like, this is it, man. There's likely no coming back. I'm probably never going to be able to work at this company again. And so there was a lot of consideration, lot to really think about. But then I was just like, you get one shot, take a shot. I don't believe any of these things they're saying about Richard C. Meyer. I'm in agreement about a lot of his views, and thankfully people were there. I think it did pretty well. We got to about $100,000 in the 60-day campaign period, which is good. Richard had planned to take this to Antarctic Press, and a comic book creator named Mark Waid, a huge SJW, went and pretty much said, hey, I'm holding back the hounds of hell. And these are his words about the conversation he had with this publisher about you publishing this book. He was cutting us off from being able to get into a publisher, which would give us free access to the entire comic book network through Diamond. And it was like, are you fucking kidding me? You had people like Neil Gaiman, who is anti-censorship. He supported Mark Waid's fund in this lawsuit. Writers, when they talk about how they're anti-censorship, then supporting a actual lawsuit involving the censorship.
I was always surprised that CBLDF never got involved until a couple of years later, when I was like, oh, that's why they didn't get involved, because that whole thing is full of corrupt a-holes.
It just seemed like, once he went to Antarctic Press, it seemed like we actually did rather well. It put that campaign into overdrive. We had over 10,000 backers at the end of it. I raised over $400,000 on it. Rich and I both made a lot of money.
It's funny because I don't know if many people know this, but Alterna got blacklisted because they thought Alterna was the publisher.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, and I had about 4 different retailers saying, if you're the ones publishing that book, because I heard it in this group and this and that. I was like, I don't even know what that book is. I'd never even heard of it. And I was like, it's not us, though. I don't know who it is. And yeah, a bunch of different retailers took us to task. And that's kind of when things started for us, too, with all of the insanity that would ensue by the end of 2018.
We're dealing with crazy people.
But all of this is the result of people getting so worked up about this stuff, getting it in their head that certain people are the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
They believe the madness that they see out there to be the truth. And then the lies become the truth, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, no matter who you try to prove yourself to be. It just becomes like, nope, that's it. That's who you are. And that's who we've declared you to be. And anything that we want to necessarily say or do to you is now justified because we've declared that you are the worst. And when you're the worst of the worst, this is how you get treated and you deserve it. And it's a very frightening thing when you sit there and think about it, especially in our position where we're just making comic books. We're literally just making stories and comics and talking to readers. And every now and then you might mention, how you feel about something. Right. But that's about it.
They called us all Nazis and white supremacists. And
it's even crazier on my end, because all I did was thank customers who just were okay with Comicsgate. And for those that, I think everybody here knows, but for those that maybe watch this and don't know, Comicsgate, there's so many people. It's unbelievably diverse. The more that you're a part of this whole group, this whole kind of wave movement, whatever it is you want to call it, there's every single person under the sun is Comicsgate, is within this realm. So it's not just this kind of, whatever political leaning or a race or a gender or whatever. There's everyone of all kinds is within this thing. So to see that, people would come along and say, well, that's because, you supported this customer and we're okay with them. And they obviously lean this way. And I'm thinking, okay, first of all, there's a lot of customers we've been around for 15 years. At the time, I think it was 12. But many of these people that are now Comicsgate actually have been with us for a very long time, for years and years and years. And you're telling me this person is the worst of the worst. They're a bigot, they're this and that. The funniest was when we would have, and Alterna's always had very diverse books, different characters, different stories, all kinds of things. The funniest is when they would attack customers that would be purchasing a book called Metaphase. And Metaphase was a book that had featured, it was written by a father who had a Down syndrome child. And the Down syndrome child was his inspiration to create this superhero character. A child who has Down syndrome wants to be like his superhero dad, but can't because he has Down syndrome. And we would have a lot of people within Comicsgate loving and appreciating and supporting that book. And the craziest part would be when certain people would attack these customers. And it's like they have one of the most diverse, groundbreaking books in the entire comic industry. And you're telling them that they're a bigot. And they have this unbelievably unbigoted, non-bigoted book. But you're still saying these awful things about them. So none of it adds up. And again, just like how I mentioned earlier before, that I have the back of my creators if they're under fire, especially for no reason whatsoever. I also have the back of the readers, because I felt like, that's not fair whatsoever to say that these people are this way when they're unbelievably not this way. They're it's so unfair. It's so ridiculous to say that. And then also you get the fact that business wise, it's the worst thing you could do to now all of a sudden conflate comics with bigotry, racism, hatred, the worst evils of the world. Because now it turns into, if you read comics, you must be a bigot. And that's insane. That's one of the most disastrous things you could do to any form of entertainment, any kind of business at all. Talk about the kiss of death. So the comic industry not standing up for their readers, for their fellow creators, unbelievably bad choice.
I think it's good to hear it. It's good to sort of remind ourselves that we need to put our stuff out there. It's not rocket science. If you make stuff that's good and you put it out there and you treat your customers well, then you're going to do okay. It's not a secret. So that was printed when I was maybe 7th or 8th grade, when a lot of people weren't born. So that's the last time that's seen print. And, it's weird because, so much has changed. It would not take a lot of money to crowdfund, a reprint of that book. I don't know who has the rights.